Joining me now on the Knicks Film School Podcast, I am honored to have as my guest. He has become one of the more, certainly one of the more heard voices in New York sports over the last decade. I still remember listening to the contest that got him his show. My God, has it been a decade? This is insanity. Now he has gone national while also staying local, and we're going to talk about that. Formerly JJ After Dark. He'll always be JJ After Dark. Let's call it like it is. But he's the host of The Ringer's New York podcast with John Jastremski. John Jastremski, what's going on, my man?
It's a pleasure to be on, man. I'm glad that we were able to make this happen. All is good. Appreciate that kind introduction. What's happening, dude?
Dude, I gotta, okay, there's so many places we could start. I'm sure there's things people want to hear about. There's only one thing I want to talk about. Staten Island. We are both from the same place.
Well, there you go. That's a good start right out of the gate.
It's the only place we got to start. So we're going to get to the show. We're going to get to the Knicks. We're going to get to all that stuff. Before any of that, humble beginnings, I consider it because I could say this because I grew up there too. When you were growing up on the island where it doesn't seem like anything good happens to anybody because it's Staten Island, did you think someday, man, I'm going to be the voice of New York sports for like the major media like outlet that covers all this stuff? Like, when did this become a thing where you're like, I'm going for this? This is going to happen for me.
I mean, you always want to dream big, right? Like, that's kind of been my thing since, I don't know, 11, 12, 13 years old. But I think going to Syracuse, setting yourself up there where you're doing a lot of shows and you're getting yourself, in a lot of different opportunities, that was big. But I mean, basically the minute I started FAN, I mean, Jonathan, I was in a position where I got to make the most of this, man. So, I can't say there's like one pivotal moment in my life where I was like, all right, this is something I want to do. But, it just kind of organically happens over time. And, you get more and more comfortable doing it. You kind of grow into your own voice, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And, now almost 10 years later, a couple of gigs later, I'm sitting here talking to you. So, yeah, I mean, from Petrini's High School to Syracuse to the Fan to the Ringer. Quite the ride, my friend.
Listen, we don't have to get into this now, but I'm pretty sure I dated a girl from Petrini's that was, we're five, because I'm 30, I'm about to be 38. You're 33, right?
Oh, wow, you're looking young for 38, bro. Give me credit, man. Good head of hair, facial, even with the beard, you're looking young.
Very kind.
You got me by a few years, yeah, because I graduated Petrini's in 2006, and I graduated Syracuse in 2010.
Okay. And this is, by the way, for anybody listening who's not from Staten Island, if you're a Staten Islander, you're legally obligated to do this. When you meet anyone else from Staten Island.
No, you got to run the mill. You got to run the gauntlet, dude. Absolutely. And I'm shocked you have not asked me yet where we're getting pizza and what is on the menu for the next couple of months. So, yeah, that kind of is par for the course. No pun intended.
Okay, we'll take it back another second. You mentioned some gigs, obviously. Gosh. The contest. When I hear the contest, I think
Seinfeld, by the way, when you say the contest.
I know, but
there's stuff that I can't say on this podcast, but I might get myself in trouble,
You could say, I appreciate that you curse on your podcast, by the way.
Yeah, it's nice. I got to be honest. For 9 years of not being able to let an F-bomb out, it's kind of refreshing. I mean, you know what? The first one I was like, kid in a candy store where like being able to say it was like a thrill for me. Now I kind of limited to like one, maybe two curse words an hour and 30 minutes,
I get messages from people who are like, yeah, I put the episode on with my two little girls in the back of the car. So I'm like, okay, I got to be cognizant of this.
Yeah, you know what, though, dude? At that point, though,
they're going to learn it anyway. So the contest, the real contest, forget Seinfeld, the real contest. Going in. So for anybody who doesn't know, you won the contest. I don't know if Francesa put it on or if he was just the host, whatever.
Yeah, no, he was hosting it when I won it. The final,
to find, the next voice of WFAN. When you I have to ask, when you won that thing, was it like, holy shit, this is my moment? Or were you taking it one step at a time? Do you remember what that felt like?
It's pretty exhilarating, dude. I mean, it really was. Now, listen, you don't want to overreact to getting a 2-hour show one day a week because, listen, you got to make the most of that. I mean, you could have that show for a year, suck, and then a year later, it's all right, you're back singing for your supper, and, your moment of glory has kind of come and gone. I think the biggest thing for me, in all seriousness, is that I just kind of felt like I needed an opportunity and a platform. And I said, if I get that first job, I'm going to make the most of it. I didn't know it was going to be at FAN for 9 years. I was thinking when I won that contest, all right, I have a year. I'm going to really hone my craft. I'm going to kick ass. And if it means I got to leave a year later and I have more opportunities that come my way, so be it. It just happened to work out where organically I was able to grow there to a certain point. You go from doing 2-hour show once a week, then filling in when a couple of people take off. Then you're doing 2 days a week. Then you're doing 3 days a week. And then, of course, you end up doing 5 days a week. So I didn't know at the time that meant, I'm going to have, a pretty lengthy and successful career at the radio station. But, you want to think positively for sure. And it was exhilarating to win that contest because it was like winning American Idol or something like that,
But listening to it, that was like, anyone who ever listened to the Fan, that was like American Idol for us. It was like listening to a live American Idol. It was crazy. So you won it, and then it comes to eventually you get to overnights. I'm curious because for me, I think because when I first started doing this, I like joke with my producer Andrew all the time. I was like, I'm fucking around with my kitchen table. It's like I'm bullshitting with the 5 people listening to me. In my mind, that's what it was. It turned out it was a few more than that. But I said whatever I wanted. I didn't think twice about anything. When you were doing overnights, was it kind of freeing to know that like it's overnights, right? It's like you could be.
I see where you're going there. I didn't look at it that way.
Okay, how did you look at it?
To me, being on at 3 a.m, especially when I first started, I'm treating it the same as I was on it. 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Like I never was mindful and aware of like, this is a time. I'm shooting the shit. I'm letting it rip. No matter what time I'm on. Does that make sense down there? Like
it makes, but
the time really, like I never have felt I was doing a different show overnight, midday, afternoon, whatever. I guess the only difference would be the length that you might take a call. That to me might be the only difference where I'm on the overnight. Let's say I have 3 people on the line. I'll give them a little bit more time. I'm on earlier in the day and I got a full board. Then I get as much leeway. In that sense,
to me though, I remember because I once upon a time, many past lives ago, was a bartender and a DJ. So there would be many a night where I'd be driving home and you'd be keeping me awake. I don't know. It was always very impressive to me because you were always so authentically you. And if you're going to make it in this market, if you're not going to be authentic, you're fucked. So,
I don't disagree with that. You have to be yourself. And I say that to any of these broadcasters coming up in the business. Listen. You obviously have to go about things a certain way. You have to, sound like you know what you're talking about, do your research, do your prep work. But at the end of the day, you have to be original. You have to be yourself. And if you're not coming across as being yourself, it comes across. I think it does. Yeah. And, some people, believe it or not, think that I'm putting on an act, which is hard to believe because anybody who spent 2 minutes with me, whether it's now, whether it's on the air, off the air, what you see, what you hear is what you get. You may like it, you may not. I really don't give a shit. But the reality is, it's like, I laugh. People are like, this guy is staging an act. I'm like, you guys, God bless you, man. God bless you. I'd love to have what you're drinking tonight,
But if you look at the people who've, Joe Beningo, obviously Francesa, it's so obviously authentic what they're doing. And I always got the same sense from you. So that's, I don't know, God bless anybody who thinks you're doing an act. If you've been able to keep up this act for that long.
I'm doing something, man. God bless. Exactly. God bless. Maybe I'm going to get nominated for a Golden Globe or
there you go.
I'm at it. Seriously.
So you mentioned the calls. Obviously, you're doing the podcast now for the Ringer. It's awesome. I love that you're doing the voicemails. I think that's a nice. It brings me back right to when you had callers. That said, it's a different animal. Do you miss the live interaction with callers?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I miss my regulars. I don't miss some of the idiots that give you a 5-word point and suck, and you got to get rid of them and you got to entertain them. I don't miss that at all. I mean, I have my regulars, my loyal JJ followers that I would have conversations with, and you kind of felt like you knew them. But I gotta say, Jonathan, I've been doing this podcast now. I think we're gonna do episode 12 later tonight, right after the NFL draft. Dude, I feel like I've been doing this podcast now for 3 years. That's the amazing thing.
It sounds like that though.
The transition for me has been very seamless. And to be honest, I didn't know if that was going to be the case, but it's a lot of the same content that helps. I think the voicemails give you that sense of home in that regard. It's not the same, but it brings that element to the table. And it's me being me. So, I definitely don't miss the hours. I can tell you that much. I don't miss. And here's what I like too about the format. If I want to do an additional podcast a week, I can do it. If it's a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night and it's kind of dead, I'm not at the point where I'm like, wow, I got to churn out a 4-hour radio show. When in reality, there ain't a whole lot going on right now. Like, those are the shows you don't miss at all. The big event, the big show, that's what you miss, maybe shooting the shit with your friends and your callers or whatever. But all in all, man, I could not be happier with the way the transition has gone, because I wondered how it would go. I had questions. I was confident it was going to go well, but I thought it might take some time. It didn't even take maybe a week. After a week, I'm like, yeah, I've been doing this forever. So,
and you talk about like you that's what you have to do, but you could do extra. When I heard the emergency pod after the Knicks' 8th win, I'm like, this is what I'm talking about here, baby. I loved it. One sport is what I do, and it's hard enough to do this. You talk about every sport. I had Evan Roberts on this podcast, I don't know, a year ago or so, and I asked him about it. I'll ask you. It's the toughest thing in the world for me to imagine. And because, again, New Yorkers, they know a fake when they see it. You can't fake it. How hard is it to keep up with everything and be equally authentic about baseball, football, basketball, for the 8 hockey fans out there, hockey, like what would be your advice for that, for people who are looking to get into like doing everything?
Watch as many games as you can. Look, it's tough. It's not perfect. There are going to be situations where you have, I don't know, both baseball teams playing, you have the Knicks playing, you have maybe a couple of hockey teams playing and whatnot, and you're going to have to try to have that editorial consent where you're a host and you say, all right, what is the big story tonight? I usually set up 2 or 3 TVs. There are going to be, but like, for example, regular season hockey, that's going to take a back seat for me. I'm not going to do as much of it as I do regular season basketball, because my audience doesn't have that same craving for it. You know what I mean? Like, I lead shows doing hockey. My ratings are going to be terrible. That's just reality. I don't care how compelling and how entertaining I may be.
No,
it's far more of a niche audience. And I think if you're going to do sports media in New York, you can't fake baseball, basketball, and football.
Nope.
That's it. You can't fake it. The biggest advice, Jonathan, I give to people getting into this, they ask me, listen, not everybody's going to have the crazy photographic memory that I do, but watch the damn games. Don't try to make it a 3-ring circus. Don't have 1,000 notes in front of you. Watch, read, react, and be conversational. And that will usually, in most cases, stand out.
So I know you've been watching, because I could tell from how you talk about it, I know you've been watching the Knicks games of late, so we'll transition to that.
Dude, this is the giddiest I've been about them in a decade, dude. I mean, listen, hallelujah.
Well,
hallelujah.
That's what I was going to ask you. If someone, I mean, I don't know how long this was in the works with Bill. If someone had told you when you first started talking about the idea of having this podcast, like, what odds would you have given it that where it's late April on the cusp of May, and somebody would have been like, yeah, you're just going to be talking about the Knicks pretty much every show. And it's not because Dolan was like, I don't know, fired half of his staff.
Dolan being Dolan, basically. Yeah, it wasn't Dolan being Dolan. What would the odds have been? Quite high. I'll put it that way. They would not have been even money odds.
No.
I think that's a kind of way of looking at it. But it's such a good thing. Listen, I'm not delusional with where they're at as a franchise. They're not winning an NBA championship. No. They're not winning multiple rounds in the playoffs. But the fact that they're going to be a possible 4 or 5 seed, the fact that they have competed their tails off the way that they have, you finally feel like they have a foundation. They have a winning culture. They have an identity. A lot of that is credited and should be attributed to the head coach, who is hands down, in my opinion, NBA Coach of the Year. I don't care what Monty Williams has done. I don't care what Quinn Snyder has done. The Knicks have been a dumpster fire for 2 decades, and he's got them multiple games over 500 and a 4 seed when they had a win total at like 21.5 for the beginning of the year. So Yeah, I did not see it coming with the pod. It's great, though, because you know this. As big as the Yankees may be, as big as the Giants may be, when the Knicks are hot and the Knicks are playing winning basketball, they're without question the number one team in town.
So we were talking about this on the pod a few weeks ago, trying to rank. You were talking. It was spurred from your discussion with Bill, trying to rank the teams. And it's funny in my mind, and maybe this because I was raised by a Yankee fan who looked at Mickey Mantle like he was a literal god on walking the earth. To me, the Yankees are always one. And then it's the Knicks fighting it out with the Giants for number 2 in this city. But then I was listening to your interview with Francesa from a few weeks ago, and he's like, there would be times where we did 90% Knicks for months at a time. Do you really think the Knicks are when the Knicks are good, they're number one?
Good, but that's the thing. You go back to the 90s, you had that going. You haven't had it going in such a long time because of where the franchise has been. So it's even difficult for a guy like me, Jonathan, to gauge it in my years of being on the air, because I think in my years of being on the air, the Knicks have only been in the playoffs twice. It was the 3 times. No, I started in 2011 twice. The year they got bounced by Miami in the first round, and then the following year they beat Boston and lost to Indiana. Those are the only 2 years I've been on the air when the Knicks have been playing playoff games. They were the dominant subject and the number one focal point of conversation during that period. I don't have much to reference, though, after that fact. You know what I mean, dude? So I will be able to give you a very good idea in mid to late May, in early June, if the Knicks advance out of round 1.
Oh, goodness.
And beat Atlanta or Boston or whoever, and what kind of buzz they're getting for that second round series. Now, they're not going to be expected to do anything in that second round series, but I think that intrigue and that sizzle and that buzz will absolutely be there. I
wonder, because, it's weird. We always hear it when you talk about the NBA, and Bill has talked about this for years. It's like the teams that are they're not going anywhere, and there's only so much buzz you could have about them. But at the same time, when there's a special story attached to it, and that's what I think is unique about this Knicks team, even in the context of other New York sports, in the last 10 years, I can't quite think of another team that outpaced expectations anywhere close to this. There was the Yankees of several years ago. But
I was going to say 17 Yankees.
17 Yankees. Yeah.
07 Giants.
No, that's a good one.
2015 Mets. But here's the element, though. Remember, the Knicks have been awful for 2 decades. Yeah. So in many ways, it makes what we've seen that much more refreshing and that much more enjoyable, considering how low the bar basically in many ways has been set. Yeah.
And you mentioned a big reason for that before is Tom Thibodeau. I agree with you. I think he should be coach of the year. I was listening to the interview you did with Van Gundy, which by the way, for anybody who hasn't listened to these, podcast is New York.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about the podcast. It's not like it's old, it's gone. You got to search it. It's on the page. Spotify, Apple, literally, you want to listen to Mike, listen to Mike. You want to listen to Van Gundy, listen to Van Gundy. All on demand, all day, every day. You know it, bro.
Just listening to Mike talk about his travel plans to open the show.
No France in Saratoga.
No France. My heart broke for him. I could listen to that man talk about paint drying. Anyway, the Van Gundy pod you did, I was thinking about it because it's been 20 years now since he thankfully got one of the last ships off the Titanic. And I'm thinking about Thibs since Van Gundy left, just in terms of coaches, managers, right, in New York sports. I'm trying to think of someone that has, inspired this much, awe and admiration in the fan base. You want to know who the only name I came up with is? Tell me if you think this is nuts. I think of Rex Ryan, because remember right at the beginning of the Ryan era, how much excitement there was about this guy who came in. He had his own way. He didn't give a shit about anything. And Thibs gives you that vibe, a different personality, obviously, but in terms of coming in, it's all right, we're going to be a serious team now. Do you get any, or does he's remind you of anybody else?
Oh, well, he left his mark. I think that is the similarity between Rex and Tom Thibodeau. The only difference is Rex came into a team that had far more talent. I mean, the Jets,
well, yeah,
they were 9-4. They lost their last 3 games, collapsed, missed the playoffs that year. And they had a good talent base. They were good on the offensive line. They had Revis. They had veterans on defense. I would look at this coaching job as even more impressive, to be honest with you, because I didn't think the talent on this team was particularly good. Going into the year, I said, no, I said if they overachieve, they're going to win low to mid 30s this year.
Oh, that would have been glorious.
32 wins. And beyond, above and beyond.
Yep.
And the development of guys on this team. Look at the development of Barrett and Randle and Quickly. That's coaching. There's no other way. That's what coaching can do, building that sort of foundation that's been lacking. So, yeah, it's hard to find one. You know, it took them more time. Buck Showalter had a similar point on the Yankees. The only thing is, Buck had 1 or 2 lean years before they got good.
Yeah.
Thibs, basically. Now, it helps that in the NBA, if you come in, you play defense, you coach them, you can get to 500. Like, it's really not that outrageous a gap, except for the Knicks. It is because of how bad they have been.
Yeah.
What's going to be interesting, though, they're over 500. They're a feel-good ride. How do you get to that next step? How do you move past being, all right, a cute team, a competitive team, a team that plays hard, to a legitimate, viable championship contender? And to me, it's all about players. It's all about talent, point blank.
Well, and you were talking about it with Francesa, and listen, give him credit. He hasn't lost his fastball yet. They need a guard. Doesn't need to be a point guard, just a guard who can make plays, make a shot. I think that's obvious, but timing is everything with this stuff, and obviously the free agent market is not great. So we'll see what they do. We're in agreement that they need one more piece. That said, this team is pretty special, and I think it all centers also around Julius Randle. So I wanted to throw another comp at you, and I think we talked about this maybe on an episode a few weeks ago, or maybe it was a live stream or something. It all runs together. A guy who came in with not a ton of a decent amount of fanfare, fell absolutely flat on his face, and then resurrected his career in New York. The only guy that I think is a valid comp, and he obviously reached higher heights than what Randle's going to reach this year, is A-Rod, because A-Rod came in and obviously the stats were there, but it didn't go so well in the playoffs. Do you see any of the A-Rod vibes in terms of the resurgence that Randle's having now?
The reason I can't put Randle and A-Rod in the same sentence, this is no knock on Julius Randle. A-Rod, I mean, you go back to his days, Yankees, Rangers, whatever. I mean, we're talking about one of the best players to ever do it.
Very true.
Randle, I see your point how he was kind of a lottery pick, Laker. People thought he was going to be a top-notch NBA pro. Didn't really live up to those heights. Goes to New Orleans. And what was the knock on Randle? It's that he was empty statistics, that he would put up 24-10 or 24-12 on a terrible team. And is he a winning player? Well, I think that's what Randle has impressed me the most with. The idea that he is a winning player. He is making the right pass. He is playing a little bit of defense. He's doing all those little things that you need to do in order to win. And if I'm going to look to a player, I'm going to stick in the NBA here. The Zach Randolph comparison for me is one that I see with Julius Randle. I think Randle's a little bit more athletic than Zebo. But remember, Zebo was a guy highly touted. Then he got fat. He got out of shape. He ended up, with Portland, even the Knicks. The Knicks basically gave him away.
We salary dumped him. We just wanted to get rid of him.
Rightfully so, because they thought they were going to be in on LeBron and Bosh and all those guys.
I remember it well, Donnie Wall.
And then he ended up going to Memphis and
had an All-NBA team. Two All-NBA teams. He had
a real good 4 to 5 year run with the Grizzlies. So I kind of see a little similarity in what Randolph has been able to do throughout his career. And now Randle having that sort of new lease on life, even though he's still super, super young. And that's the amazing. Guy's been in the league forever, but he's still super young.
Yeah, it's funny. Somebody compared a video of one of Julius's long jumpers to it reminded them of Zach, and they're not terribly dissimilar. I think Randle has a higher ceiling, which I think you would probably agree with too. But we'll see how the next few years go. A couple more, and then we get you out of here. I know you got a lot to do with the draft tonight. By the way, prediction for the Dolphins? I'm going
to go very generic. They will add a playmaker for my guy Tua. Who that's going to be, Right now, I'm going to say it's going to be Jalen Waddle because I think Pitts and I think Chase are going to be gone. And I think they're going to go Waddle over Devontae Smith. That's my personal take.
Okay. Do you believe in Tua?
I do.
You do.
I think he's got to be a lot better. I think the limitations his first year coming back off the hip were problematic.
Okay.
It did not help that you had an older quarterback that knew the system as well as Fitzmagic did. I think in many ways he was like a crutch, like it's, when in doubt, we could turn the reins over to Fitz and he could pull us out of the fire. Yeah. I don't think that was necessarily a good thing for Tua, but listen, it's not going to hurt him long term because either he'll be able to play or he won't be able to play. Yeah. So he's got to make a big step forward though this year. I don't think there's any question. Okay.
I liked him. A couple of times I watched him last year. Okay, 2 more on the Knicks. One, how important do you think what the Knicks do in the playoffs, assuming they get there? Not there yet, but let's assume they get there. Well, actually,
they'll be there.
We hope they will be. How important do you think that will be towards changing? We always talk about the narrative, continuing to change the narrative. Again, and Van Gundy talked about it on your podcast, the notion that guys will want to come here now. Do you think it matters if they get in and they get, they lose in 5 games to the Bucks versus if they get in, they win around maybe as a 4 or 5 seed and then push someone? How much do you think that makes a difference?
I don't think it hurts them by losing in the playoffs. I think it will, let's put it this way. I don't think there's a negative for them bowing out to one of these vastly superior teams. Look at it as house money. If they play well, it only enhances that narrative that you're moving in the right direction. You know what I mean? It's not a bad thing because, listen, the NBA playoffs especially are talent-driven type of competitions. Talent prevails no matter how hard you may work, no matter how tough you may be. 90% of the time, 95% of the time in the NBA, the talented team is going to win. It's just the way the sport works. So from that standpoint, I don't think it will hurt the Knicks, but playing well, it only is going to enhance your chances. Yeah,
I completely agree. Last one, I spend a lot of time, more time than I should, thinking about, local angles for teams versus national angles for teams and coverage and how teams are perceived and all of that stuff. You now have a national podcast, right? But it is catered to New York. I'm just curious, it's not even Knicks specific, but just generally, do you still approach this when I'm talking about the Knicks, or do you feel like I'm talking about the Knicks for Knicks fans in New York, or do you feel like this has to be for every, how do you?
No, I don't look at it that way at all. I look at it where I'm assuming most people, Jonathan, who will listen to my podcast, have an interest and have a tie-in with the New York fan base, teams, audience, whatever. Listen, we may have some anti-New York people listening to the pod for all I know. We probably do. I'm not really that concerned in talking to them and trying to give them their voice. Now, listen, like I do with my radio show, a majority of stuff is going to be local centric. There's a big story, though. I'll give you an example. Aaron Rodgers, the idea that he might get traded, if indeed that happens. You can best believe I'm talking about that on my podcast. When the NFL rolls around, I'm not going to do 2-hour podcasts on the Jets and the Giants. I'm going to talk about the league because it matters to people and there's, an interest all over the place. So, no, from that standpoint, I'm going to do the show. Like I was telling you about 3 in the afternoon or 3 in the morning. Yep. I'm going to do it with the same sort of perspective that I have for all this time. And that's just the way it's going to be. I'm not going to try to explain New York narratives and storylines, assuming that I got to kind of give a national audience a refresher or a tutorial. That's frankly not my concern.
That I'm happy, and you haven't been doing that, and I'm happy to hear it's going to stay that way. Only because you brought it up, I'm going to put you on the spot. This podcast is going to drop tomorrow. Aaron Rodgers is still a Packer by the time this podcast drops?
Yeah. And if I'm wrong, listen, you could tweet it. We could have some fun. This stuff,
I have no idea. I don't even.
I don't either. I'm rolling a dice like you. I just don't get the sense it happens tonight. I think maybe over the next 2 weeks, not tonight.
I brought up to my wife, I was like, can you imagine if they got another former Packer legendary quarterback? My wife's all aboard. She just wants to see competitive football, so I don't blame her. John Jastremski, not that anybody should know or not know this by now, but can you just let the folks know at home where they could find you and all your stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So New York, New York is our new podcast with 12 episodes deep starting tonight. You can find us on Spotify, search New York, New York, Apple Podcast, search New York, New York. John_Jastremski for those of you keeping score on Twitter. And this beautiful mug will be on SNY later tonight too. So
okay, I know what I'm going to be tuning into. John Jastremski, ladies and gentlemen.